Well, good afternoon, Blackhawk family. Pastor Steve here on a Saturday afternoon. I wanted to take a minute today to revisit a couple of things from last Sunday's sermon that I didn't have time to fully unpack during our time together that are really important and interesting. The first thing I wanted to share with you guys about is the genealogy in Matthew chapter 1 and some hidden things in there that I touched on a little bit, but there's so much more to explore. In Matthew 1's genealogy of Jesus, there are several women listed. Now, that's very unusual in first century Hebrew genealogy for a number of reasons, and Matthew's inclusion of these women in it is remarkable just on its face. But beyond that, it's amazing because of the backstory of each one of these women, and of course the men who surround them. In Matthew chapter 1 and verse 3, it mentions Judah. We talked about Judah and Isaac's blessing of him at the end. Jacob's blessing of him at the end of Genesis chapter 49, and that the shoot or the branch from Jesse would one day have a scepter and a rule that would not depart from him. In Genesis 38, there's a story about Judah and that he takes a wife, and this wife bears him 3 sons. The first, he finds a wife for his sons, but the first son is a wicked person, and it says that God puts him to death. Then he says to the wife of his first son, whose name is Tamar, who is mentioned in the genealogy, he says to Tamar, you need to his son, his second son, you need to take the wife of your older brother and raise up children for him because he's dead. This is levirate marriage. It was very common in the Old Testament, and it's talked about quite a bit in the book of Genesis. Well, the second son does not want to do that because they won't be his children. I mean, not really. And so because of his wickedness and unwillingness to do what God and his father have said, God puts him to death as well. And so Judah tells Tamar, the wife of his now first son who is gone and given then to his second son, both now dead, stricken dead by the Lord. He says, remain a widow, remain in mourning until my youngest son is old enough for you to be his wife. Well, Tamar does this, and then some time passes and Judah goes into the city. And Tamar, because she's been treated badly by Judah, Tamar dresses herself as a prostitute and seduces her father-in-law, Judah. And Judah is mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus as the father of Perez and Zerah by his daughter-in-law, by Tamar. And from this line, down the line, some ways, is Boaz, who is born to Rahab, the prostitute from the days of the conquest in Jericho. So already we've got 2 women, and one is listed because she is mistreated, and she, in her own act of deception and revenge to her father-in-law, fathers children by him. And then in that line comes Boaz, born to Rahab, the prostitute from Jericho. And then down the line beyond that, Boaz, the father of Obed by Ruth, who is a Moabitess. The people of Moab are, in the story of the Old Testament, are the offspring of Lot and his daughters. When Lot is driven out of the city of Sodom and Gomorrah, his wife turns back and is turned to a pillar of salt, and then Lot's daughters are out in the wilderness with him. And they say, we're not going to have any kids of our own. So they seduce their own father and bear children by him. And in the Moabite line, of course, as a Moabitess, is Ruth. So this is a scandal. It's a scandal in any way you slice it. So far we have Tamar, and we have Rahab, a prostitute, and we have Ruth, a Moabitess, in the lineage of the children of Lot and his daughters. Then down the line, Ruth Obed the father of Jesse, Jesse the father of David the king. David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah. David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah, by somebody else's wife. This, of course, is Bathsheba. Solomon the father of Rehoboam, and then on it goes through the rest of the king list in the Old Testament. There are 4 women listed there: Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba, who isn't really ever named. She simply is called the wife of Uriah, somebody else's wife. Uriah, by the way, is one of David's mighty men. And so David's betrayal, David's adultery with Bathsheba is made worse because he deliberately, of course, as you know the story, he deliberately places Uriah, one of his mighty men, one of his dearest, closest friends, in harm's way to disguise his sin. I suppose the moral of all this, friends, there are several things to say. One is that the New Testament, from its earliest page, its earliest words, it lifts up women. It gives them pride of place that was very unusual, again, in the ancient world. And secondly, these are all women who have a checkered past, usually because of the men associated with them. But in any case, there's this remarkable demonstration of God's grace. These are people in the line of Jesus Christ, our Savior. So God's grace extends that far that he's not willing to overlook the perhaps shady elements in the Old Testament, and he lifts up these 4 women as they are immortalized in the genealogy of Jesus Christ in Matthew, and I find that to be utterly remarkable. You may have known that before, but we can mine these genealogies. Another reason why you shouldn't ignore genealogies. Talked about that genealogy from Nehemiah in our study of Nehemiah some time ago. So I encourage you, friends, the story of Christmas has sharp edges. There's a lot there, and there's grace to be found there, and there's lifting up to be found there. There's empowerment to be found there, because God, from the earliest pages, again, of the New Testament, lifts up women, gives them place, immortalizes them, and despite the maybe undesirable circumstances around each one of those persons, God deliberately inserts them into the story of Jesus. And you and I, each one of us, also have our own complicated elements in our story, and God's grace is sufficient for all of us in all of our weakness. So I encourage you with that today, and I'll be back in a minute with another video, just doing some more talking about the prophecies from last week that we didn't get a chance to fully unpack. I'll look forward to seeing you again very soon.